The Last Passenger, Part 1. Everyone in Ashridge knew the story of the ghost train. No one knew where it came from. No one knew where it went. But everyone knew one thing. Every year, on the night of October 31st, at exactly 2:17 a.m., an old steam train crossed Blackwood Bridge. The strange part was that there had been no railroad there for more than 20 years. The tracks had been ripped out after a terrible accident that killed dozens of passengers. Since then, nothing but cracked concrete and rusted signs remained. Still, every Halloween people heard the whistle. Parents warned their children never to stay outside after 2 in the morning. Teenagers dared each other to visit the bridge, but most ran away long before the clock struck 2:17. The town had one simple rule. If you hear the train, don't look for it. If you see it, don't wave. And if the doors open, never step inside. Daniel Carter had heard the legend hundreds of times. As an investigative journalist, he didn't believe ghost stories. He believed in facts, cameras, and evidence. When his editor asked him to write a Halloween feature about America's strangest urban legends, Ashridge was the obvious choice. It's probably just fog, an old sound echo, and people scaring themselves, Daniel said as he packed his equipment. His editor smiled. That's what the last reporter said. What happened to him? He quit journalism. Daniel laughed. Seriously? No one has heard from him since. The joke wasn't funny. 3 days later, Daniel arrived in Ashridge. The town felt frozen in time. Old brick buildings lined empty streets. Most stores closed before sunset. Even the gas station shut down at 9. People avoided eye contact whenever Daniel mentioned Blackwood Bridge. Only one elderly woman agreed to speak with him. She owned a tiny antique shop filled with dusty clocks that all showed different times. When Daniel asked about the ghost train, her smile disappeared. You're planning to go there tonight, aren't you? I'm just filming a documentary. She slowly nodded. Everyone says that. She reached beneath the counter and handed him a faded black and white photograph. It showed a steam train packed with smiling passengers. Daniel frowned. What am I supposed to see? The woman pointed to a young man standing beside the last carriage. He was holding a camera. He looked exactly like Daniel. The Last Passenger, Part 2. Daniel stared at the photograph, unable to speak. The young man in the picture had the same dark hair, the same jacket, even the same scar above his left eyebrow. It was impossible. Who is he? Daniel finally asked. The old woman slowly took the photo back. No one knows his name, she said. The picture was found after the train crash in 1999. Everyone in it died, except the photographer. At least that's what people believed. Daniel forced a laugh. Someone edited the photo. There was no editing in 1999. He didn't answer. Instead, he thanked her and returned to his motel. The photo stayed in his mind all afternoon. By evening, thick fog had rolled into Ashridge. Streetlights glowed like blurry stars, and almost every house had its curtains closed. At 1:30 a.m., Daniel loaded fresh batteries into his camera. 2 backup cameras, a voice recorder, a flashlight, and a drone. If there's really a train, he muttered, I'll be the first person to prove it. The drive to Blackwood Bridge took 15 minutes. The closer he got, the quieter the world became. No wind, no insects. Not even the sound of his own tires seemed normal. When he parked, his phone suddenly lost all signal. His watch stopped. 2:11 a.m. It never moved again. Daniel climbed onto the abandoned bridge and placed cameras in every direction. One pointed north, one south, one directly at the empty space where the tracks had once been. Everything was ready. The fog grew thicker. Then a whistle, long, low, ancient. It echoed through the darkness. Daniel's heartbeat quickened. His cameras were recording. A faint yellow light appeared in the distance. At first, it looked like a lantern. Then another. Then dozens. The lights moved closer. Metal wheels clattered against rails that no longer existed. Steam drifted across the bridge. Out of the fog emerged a massive black locomotive. Its iron body looked untouched by time. The brass numbers on its side read, D. The train rolled silently onto the bridge and stopped directly in front of Daniel. Every window was filled with motionless passengers. None of them blinked. None of them smiled. They simply watched him. Then with a slow metallic creak, The last carriage door opened by itself. The Last Passenger, Part 3. The door remained open. No one stepped out. No one spoke. The only sound was the slow hiss of steam escaping from the ancient locomotive. Daniel raised his camera with shaking hands and zoomed in on the last carriage. The passengers inside looked unnaturally still. Men in old-fashioned suits sat beside women wearing dresses from different decades. A young soldier in uniform stared out one window. Across from him sat a little girl holding a worn teddy bear. None of them moved. None of them blinked. Daniel whispered into his recorder. Time. 2:17 a.m. I'm looking at a train that shouldn't exist. Approximately 50 passengers visible. No signs of life. The recorder suddenly crackled with loud static. Then a voice came through. It wasn't Daniel's. Don't count them. He froze. Slowly he lowered the recorder. 1, 2, 3. The passengers began turning their heads toward him. Not all at once. One after another. Their movements were slow, unnatural, as if invisible strings were pulling them into place. Daniel took a step backward. His boot scraped against the concrete. Every passenger turned at the exact same moment. Dozens of pale eyes locked onto him. A cold wave rushed through his body. Then he noticed something impossible. One seat near the back was empty. The only empty seat on the entire train. Above it hung a small brass plate. Reserved. The old woman's warning echoed in his mind. If the doors open, never step inside. Just then, someone inside the carriage lifted a hand. It was the man from the old photograph. The man who looked exactly like Daniel. He stood up from his seat and slowly walked toward the open door. With every step, his face became clearer. It wasn't just someone who looked like Daniel. It was Daniel, only older. His hair was streaked with gray. A long scar ran across his cheek. His eyes were filled with exhaustion and fear. He stopped in the doorway. For several seconds, neither of them spoke. Finally, the older Daniel looked directly into his younger self and whispered only 4 words. You still have time. Before Daniel could answer, the train lights flickered. The whistle screamed again, and something deep inside the darkness behind the older Daniel began to move. The Last Passenger, Part 4. Daniel couldn't take his eyes off the darkness inside the carriage. At first, it looked like an ordinary shadow. Then it shifted, not like a person, not like an animal. It stretched across the ceiling, bending in ways no living thing could. The lights inside the train dimmed as it moved, as if the darkness itself was swallowing them. The older Daniel stepped backward. For the first time, fear appeared on his face. Don't let it see you, he whispered. What is it? Daniel asked. The older version of himself didn't answer. Instead, he looked toward the empty seat marked reserved. It wants someone to take that seat, he said quietly. Every year it waits. A cold wind swept across the bridge. The passengers still hadn't moved. They remained perfectly silent, staring through the windows with lifeless eyes. Suddenly, the little girl holding the teddy bear smiled. It wasn't a normal smile. It was too wide, far too wide. One by one, the other passengers began smiling too. None of them blinked. None of them breathed. Their expressions grew wider and wider until they looked painfully unnatural. Daniel's camera beeped. Battery 100%. A second later, battery 0%. The screen went black. His flashlight died. His phone wouldn't turn on. Only the train's yellow lights remained. The older Daniel reached into his coat and pulled out a small pocket watch. Its hands spun wildly before stopping at exactly 2:17. It doesn't matter how much time passes here, he said. On this bridge, it's always 2:17. A loud metallic clang echoed from somewhere beneath the train. Then another. Something was climbing. Not inside the train. Under it. Daniel slowly looked down. Between the wheels, hidden by steam, pale fingers wrapped around the iron frame. Then another hand. And another. Dozens of white hands crawled out from beneath the locomotive, gripping the metal as though countless unseen people were trying to pull themselves aboard. The bridge began to shake. The older Daniel's voice became desperate. Listen to me carefully. In a few seconds, the conductor will ask for your ticket. I don't have one. You do? What are you talking about? The older Daniel pointed at Daniel's jacket pocket. With trembling hands, Daniel reached inside. His fingers touched a piece of thick paper. He slowly pulled it out. An old train ticket, printed with today's date, and his full name. The last passenger in Part 5. Daniel stared at the ticket in disbelief. His hands shook as he turned it over. The paper felt old, brittle, as if it had been hidden away for decades. Across the front, faded black ink spelled out his name. Passenger Daniel Carter. Departure Blackwood Bridge. Destination unknown. There was no seat number. Only one word stamped in dark red ink. Final! I never bought this, Daniel whispered. You don't have to, the older Daniel replied. No one does. A slow, rhythmic sound echoed through the train. Tap, tap, tap. Heavy footsteps. They came from the front carriage, moving closer, one carriage at a time. The passengers didn't react. They continued smiling, waiting. The footsteps stopped just beyond the open doorway. A tall figure emerged from the shadows. The conductor. His uniform looked perfectly clean despite its age. A black cap covered most of his face, but beneath its brim there was only darkness. No eyes, no skin, only a hollow void. In one white-gloved hand, he held an old brass ticket punch. In the other, a leather book filled with hundreds of names. He opened it slowly. Without looking, he spoke in a calm voice. Daniel Carter. The sound of his name echoed across the bridge. The conductor extended his hand. Your ticket. Daniel couldn't move. Every instinct told him to run, yet his feet felt rooted to the concrete. The older Daniel stepped between them. You can't have him. The conductor tilted his head. For the first time, the passengers looked away from Daniel. They were watching the older man. The conductor spoke again. His seat has been waiting. The older Daniel clenched his fists. I took it. Silence. Then the conductor slowly closed the leather book. You borrowed it. The temperature dropped instantly. Ice spread across the bridge beneath Daniel's boots. The older Daniel turned back, his voice urgent. I lied to you before. I didn't escape this train. What do you mean? I got on 30 years from now. Daniel's heart stopped. You become me. The conductor raised the brass ticket punch. With one sharp click, every light inside the train went out. The bridge disappeared into complete darkness. Then from somewhere only inches behind Daniel's shoulder, a voice whispered, We found our replacement. The last passenger, Part 6. Daniel spun around. No one was there. The whisper had come from the darkness itself. His breathing became faster as cold fog wrapped around his legs. The bridge had vanished beneath a blanket of black mist, leaving only the glowing outline of the train. Then the silence broke. The passengers began to stand, not one at a time, all at once. Dozens of bodies rose in perfect unison. The movement was so synchronized that it felt mechanical, as if they were controlled by a single invisible mind. Their smiles disappeared. Now their faces were empty, expressionless. They slowly stepped into the aisle, leaving the seats one by one. Only the reserved seat remained empty, waiting. The conductor raised one gloved hand. Boarding? Every passenger turned toward the open door. Without making a sound, they pointed at Daniel. The older Daniel grabbed his arm. Run! The spell was broken. Daniel sprinted across the bridge as fast as he could. Behind him came the deafening blast of the train whistle. He didn't dare look back. The bridge shook beneath his feet. Old concrete cracked. Rusted guardrails bent inward, as though enormous hands were squeezing them. Just a few steps from the end of the bridge, Daniel glanced over his shoulder. He wished he hadn't. The passengers were no longer inside the train. They were outside, walking toward him, slowly, calmly. Hundreds of pale figures crossed the bridge without making a single sound. Some looked like children. Some looked ancient. Others wore clothes from centuries apart. But every one of them had the same lifeless eyes. The older Daniel stood alone between them and the conductor. He looked at his younger self and smiled sadly. I've been waiting for this moment. What are you doing? Daniel shouted. Changing the ending. The older Daniel reached into his pocket and held up the train ticket bearing Daniel's name. Before the conductor could stop him, he tore the ticket in half. The scream that followed wasn't human. The entire train shook violently. The windows shattered outward. The smiling passengers froze where they stood. Cracks spread across the locomotive as if it were made of glass instead of steel. For the first time, the conductor stepped backward. The older Daniel looked at Daniel one last time. Leave. And never come back? Then he turned to face the train alone. The darkness swallowed him. A second later, the bridge exploded with blinding white light. The last passenger, Part 7. Daniel woke up lying on cold pavement. Morning sunlight shone through the trees. For a moment, everything felt normal. Birds were singing. Cars passed on a nearby road. The bridge looked exactly as it had the day before, old, cracked, and completely empty. The train was gone. Daniel sat up, his head pounding. Had it all been a dream? His cameras were scattered across the bridge. Every battery was dead. Every memory card contained nothing but hours of black footage, except one. The last camera had recorded exactly 12 seconds. The video showed Daniel standing alone on the bridge at 2:17 a.m. He wasn't speaking. He wasn't moving. Then, without warning, he slowly turned toward empty air and nodded as if someone had given him an instruction. The recording ended there. No train, no passengers, no older Daniel. Nothing. Shaken, Daniel drove back to town. Ashridge was different. People smiled at him. Stores were open. Children played outside. It was as if the fear that had haunted the town for decades had simply disappeared. Curious, Daniel returned to the antique shop. The old woman was waiting. "I was wondering if you'd come back," she said. Daniel placed the black and white photograph on the counter. "I met him." The woman's eyes widened. She looked down at the picture. Then she gasped. The young man with the camera was gone. Only an empty space remained where he had once stood. Tears filled the old woman's eyes. He finally got off the train. Daniel felt a strange mixture of relief and sadness. "So it's over?" The woman didn't answer immediately. Instead, she walked to an old wooden shelf and picked up a dusty newspaper dated November 1st, 1999. The headline read, "Ghost Train Disaster Claims 47 Lives." Below the headline was a list of every victim. Daniel scanned the names. His heart nearly stopped. At the very bottom of the page, written in faded ink, was one final entry. Daniel Carter, missing. Not dead, missing. And beside the article, someone had written a single sentence in red ink. Some passengers never arrive. The last passenger, Part 8, final. Daniel left Ashridge that afternoon. He never published the story. His editor called him every day for a week, asking where the article was. Daniel only had one answer. "You wouldn't believe me." Eventually, everyone forgot about the ghost train. Months passed. Daniel tried to move on with his life, but strange things began to happen. Every night, he woke up at exactly 2:17 a.m. His bedroom was always freezing cold. Sometimes he heard a distant train whistle. Sometimes he smelled coal smoke. And sometimes he'll be found muddy footprints leading from his front door to his bedroom. 1 year later, on October 31st, Daniel decided to prove to himself that it was all over. He drove back to Blackwood Bridge. The town looked peaceful. No one tried to stop him. The bridge was empty. He waited. 2:16 a.m. Nothing. Daniel smiled. It really is over. Then his watch ticked once. 2:17 a.m. A whistle echoed through the darkness. The fog rolled in faster than ever before. A yellow light appeared. Then another. The ghost train returned. But this time it was different. The last carriage door was already open. Inside, every seat was empty, except one. A man sat beside the window, holding a camera. He looked tired, older. A scar crossed his cheek. Daniel slowly stepped closer. The man raised his head. It was him, not a ghost, not a reflection, his future. The older Daniel gave a faint, exhausted smile. "I couldn't stop it," he said quietly. "I only delayed it." The conductor appeared behind him. Without a word, he opened the leather book. This time, only one name remained inside. Daniel Carter. The conductor looked up. All journeys must end. The train whistle screamed. The lights went out. When sunrise came, the bridge was empty once again. No train, no footprints, no Daniel, only an old camera lying on the cracked concrete. The police searched for weeks. They never found him. Years later, another journalist arrived in Ashridge to investigate the legend of the ghost train. Before leaving town, an old woman handed the reporter a faded black and white photograph. It showed a steam train filled with silent passengers. Standing beside the last carriage was a man holding a camera. He looked directly into the lens. His name was Daniel Carter, and if you look closely, he's not smiling. He's trying to warn the next passenger.